Emotional intelligence is, and that self-regulation piece specifically, is that ability to process those emotions, know what you're feeling them, and be able to actually kind of say like, okay, is this emotion going to be something that's productive for whatever my task at hand is? And if not, can I use that same energy I got off of from that emotion, call it anger maybe, and instead of lashing out at my team or flipping off the other driver, take that energy that I've just gained from this thing that happened to me and redirect it into a response that's actually going to create a positive outcome.
Welcome to episode 13 of the Half and Half Club. 13 already. My name is Ryan.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Dom.
And one of us is from Illinois, one's from Pennsylvania, one's from California. We all ended up in Charlotte, North Carolina, created a podcast together. Half is about serious topics, half is about casual. Today we talk about the Pac-12 and we talk about emotional intelligence. Let's go. Airport. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so I don't think I talked about this on the pod. I know Alex shared his airport pain the other day. His was definitely more substantial than mine, but I did find myself in the Cleveland airport a couple weeks ago for about 6.5 hours. So I made many laps around that pretty small airport and found my way into one of the general stores there and picked up a book here. So I've got Harvard Business Review's 10 must-reads on emotional intelligence, which is something that I think has been gaining a lot of prevalence lately. I think I've certainly heard a lot more about it. I don't know about you guys. EQ, what do you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my company, we literally just had a company meeting, and we literally did an emotional intelligence workshop.
Really?
So, yeah,
okay.
A few weeks ago.
I feel like it's something too that's it's one of those things that's kind of like picking up speed, gaining momentum. Like you're starting to hear about it a lot more. So I was intrigued. Yeah. It's something that has been on my mind for a little bit, but I don't think I'd ever really deeply dived into it. The buzzword when I think emotional intelligence, like the first word that pops into my mind is empathy, and that's kind of it. Like that's just what I thought it was, kind of like being able to understand other people. I don't know. What about you? Is that kind of in line with what you guys think?
I don't know. You know what's funny? When I thought of emotional intelligence, it was like I would have thought it was like not reacting so quickly to things.
Okay.
Or like rationalizing your thinking.
Okay.
Is like the first thing I thought of.
Yeah. Ryan?
Like when I hear intelligence, I think of like, intelligent people understand things well. So I was thinking it's a way of understanding your emotions. Like what is happening, like what your emotions are, what's happening in the moment, realizing that, understanding that, and then making decisions based off that instead of like spur of the moment.
Yeah. No, I think those are both spot on. I think my thought had always been, it was, like I said, empathy. So like very much like outward facing and understanding like other people. And your guys is interesting because you're kind of more understanding yourself and understanding your own emotions, which I think are all parts of it. But it had always been kind of like an abstract term for me, especially. So it was kind of cool that actually the section that they had the book on had HBR, Harvard Business Review, had also split it out into like mini series. So they had maybe like call it 10 of them, where it's just like different subcategories. I picked up one on confidence, which is kind of like a subcategory of emotional intelligence, actually, which I thought was pretty interesting. But this one I picked up here is just their 10 must-reads of the year on emotional intelligence. So there's 10 chapters in it, essentially, and each one is kind of like a different article on it. So the first one I read, which is the one that I wanted to talk about with you guys, is interesting because it actually lays it out into kind of what the 5 pillars are that they define it to be. And I think what we all kind of said is laid out pretty much in those pillars, but they were self-regulation, which is kind of what you had mentioned, Alex. There was empathy, which is what I had mentioned. There was motivation. There was self-awareness, which I think is another big one. And they had one at the end, which was social skill, which is kind of an interesting one because you don't really know, like that seems very abstract as well. But those are kind of like the 5 pillars it lays it out into in terms of emotional intelligence. And you can kind of like go through each chapter and see, what you think you have and what kind of defines each one of them.
Which of those 5 pillars do you think you have, like, what did you expect to be in there? You got to have a good grasp on, you think? And what did you, like, not expect to be in there?
So the empathy was the one that because empathy is what I thought just like emotional intelligence was like as a whole. Like I thought it was, like I didn't understand that there was more to it than kind of that. Like I kind of knew there was, but I hadn't really appreciated it. The interesting one for me really was self-regulation. And self-regulation is, like you had kind of alluded to, we're all emotional beings, right? We have emotions, and there's plenty of external factors that come into play throughout the day. Like maybe someone cuts you off in the car, maybe like at work, someone, isn't pulling their weight, or something goes against you, and you have emotions that come up, right? And it could be anger, it could be sadness, and emotional intelligence is, and that self-regulation piece specifically, is that ability to process those emotions, know what you're feeling them, and be able to actually kind of say like, okay, is this emotion going to be something that's productive for whatever my task at hand is? And if not, can I use that same energy I got off of from that emotion, call it anger maybe, and instead of lashing out at my team or flipping off the other driver, take that energy that I've just gained from this thing that happened to me and redirect it into a response that's actually going to create a positive outcome for me or for my team.
It's a lot of self-awareness. It takes a lot of self-awareness to do that.
Well, that's another pillar too, and it's this where they're all very interconnected, which I think is the cool thing, because that's where self-awareness plays into it too. Is you can kind of get in front of it, and you can say, because you're self-aware, that certain situations are going to make you feel certain ways. Like, man, that Alex guy's a real dick to work with. So if I'm working on a project with him, I'm aware that certain things he does like might make me feel a certain way. And then it's like, I know that and I'm aware of that. And then if those things do happen, that self-regulation is being able to channel that energy differently and in a more positive way.
Well, yeah, because, we've probably all had times at work where, let me know if you guys have, but like where you're overthinking or like overreacting to something, and you just can't get it off your mind, and it's like almost like ruins your next couple hours. Like, and you're like, have you ever felt like your heart rate get up, or you said something dumb like by accident or something, or like sent an email with like a typo on someone's name, and
absolutely.
But that's like it happens. It's whatever, and then it's like you just waste your energy like exhausting yourself on your emotions about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So 2 things off of that. One, I try to tell myself that whenever something like that happens, that most people are worried about themselves anyway. They're not like focused on me and what I'm saying. Like they'll be like, oh, that's funny. He probably know we did a typo there. Right. But I'll take that one step further is I actually thought about this last week. So not in the moment was I like thinking about it too much, but I was anticipating something, and I was already running through my mind I was like, I know this is going to happen. This person's going to say this. And my emotions were already getting worked up before it even happened because I thought I knew what was going to happen. And then it was funny because it was actually a self-lesson. It got to the meeting, and it went nothing like I expected.
Dude, that makes so much sense. Like, yeah, you're overhyping something in the future.
Before I even knew.
So, and if you were able to recognize, like, oh, I'm overhyping this for the future, you could like be like, okay, like I know I'm doing it. I'm gonna stop and focus on this, or even like counteract it with like maybe you needed to be a little more prepared or something. So you spend a few more minutes doing that, and then it's like now you're not afraid of the meeting. Those feelings are gone or something, right. So you can address them.
Yes, I think it made me more prepared for that meeting, which so. In that way, it acted as a positive. But then also, after the meeting, I was like, I got worked up over nothing. I was like, I feel like a fool because I spent so much time thinking about how it could have gone. And I guess that's a good way to prepare for something. But at the same time, like, I think I should have had a different emotion toward it than I did.
Right.
So, I think that's kind of what you're talking about, Dom.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of interesting too, because I think that like stress in those situations can be helpful for productivity, which isn't necessarily related to emotional intelligence directly, but I think indirectly probably. But yeah, it is kind of interesting because you think about how much emotion goes into like even like something what should be very objective, like work. It's like everyone has lives outside of work. We have things that we really want to be emotional about, which are like, the people we care about, the people who are close to us, things that we're passionate about. And, hopefully, we find work that, we are at least somewhat passionate about or enjoy. But, generally work requires very kind of like objective responses, and there's so much emotion that comes into it because it's like you find something at work and maybe they like screwed up and you're just like, man, I know the right thing to do is to like raise the flag on this or to like bring it up to my boss, but then you're so concerned about that emotional piece of it, which is, how are they going to like feel about this? And that's kind of the thing that you mentioned, Ron, is you have no idea and you prepare so much for the worst and you're like, man, I'm going to get like reamed out, like I'm going to get yelled at, like all this stuff, and it builds up and you probably spend hours more than you need to thinking about how you're going to approach this, and then you go to do it and it turns out it's like not that big of a deal in the end.
So is this book, or maybe this chapter that you're on or whatever, or article, is it essentially laying out what emotional intelligence is so that you're aware of it, or is it giving you like tactics to like addressing it, like, and apply it?
Yeah, it's I think awareness is probably like awareness and kind of like defining what it is, right, is probably most of it. And there's a little bit too. I think there's always that nature versus nurture concept when you're talking about things like intelligence or like are people just born with a high IQ, or is it something you can acquire? Is it something you can work on? And I think there's elements of both with IQ, and I think EQ, or like emotional. I think EQ is like emotional quotient or whatever is what they call it. But emotional intelligence is kind of the same way. But one of the things that they did mention is that from a learning and improving perspective, it's not something that's really well addressed by a course because it's so individualized, like that it's so interpersonal and so unique to each person's emotions that it's not really something you can go to like a weekend course and like do a master class on for 3 hours and like actually improve. It's something that you have to constantly practice in your daily life mindfully and get feedback on and improve from that, and be willing to take criticism from it, either from yourself or from other people. And right. Obviously if you're self-aware, it makes it a little bit easier, right? And that's one of the hallmarks. So it's a little bit iterative there. But
you hit it, like it's individualized. Like you said, there's not a step-by-step process to becoming emotional intelligent, because I mean, look at us three. Whenever you mention emotional intelligence, you brought up one thing, I brought up another, and Alex brought up another thing. So like each of those 5 pillars, everyone relates to one of them probably, a lot, and then the other 4 maybe not. So I think I like it when books like this, like, give you a few points and then break it down from there, because I'm sure each of those points like probably relates to different people, like you said. Mm-hmm. So like the fact that, we each took something different from the title, but then, can learn about the other things, that will only strengthen, how we feel about it totally, like overall. Just kind of reiterates it.
Yeah. There's some interesting hallmarks of each one too. Like I think, so confidence is a big hallmark of self-awareness. And there's always that kind of discussion around, like, is someone confident or are they arrogant? Like, where do you draw that line between confidence and overconfidence? And people who are strong in self-awareness, right, are very, being self-aware, what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And I think being strong in that category helps you so much to be confident, because you're aware in the things that you are good at, and you have one of the hallmarks is you're realistic about it, right? You're not like too self-deprecating, and you're not too over lofty with your own expectations of yourself. So you know what you're good at, and you can be confident in that, but you also know what you're not good at. And part of that self-awareness too is like knowing that you're not good at it, but accepting it and knowing when, the areas that you need help in and being comfortable with it. And I think that's kind of really what leads to confidence.
Yeah, good.
No,
you go.
No, I mean, and sometimes I think even I think me, like you. So I've meditated a good amount, and I think that's kind of what helps me be like from last week realize that my emotions were getting worked up. But where was I going with that? But I kind of lost it after that. But
well, I could talk about while you're thinking about that. I was just gonna say what we did at our company workshop, maybe to show like this is like just another application. I mean, it's so actually it's a different angle I think than what we're talking about. A lot of this we've talked about is like individualized and like we were saying, but so the exercise that we did was we wrote down on a big sheet of paper. We had 4 or 5 different emotions. So it was like sad. Think of all of the synonyms for sad. Excited, and then like all the synonyms for excited, happy, and then like what was it? I said sad already. Like angry, right? And then so you put these papers across the room and say, all right, go to the paper where your feelings most align with a certain situation. So it was, you go to McDonald's and they give you cold fries. What do you feel? What's your emotional intelligence? And this really opened my eyes. I'm amazed how many different people went to different corners. Like some people were like, yeah, I'm upset about it because I really wanted hot fries. And then some other people were like, I'm angry. Like I expected like fries to be hot. Like I had expectations. And the others like, I don't know, like some people were even funny. They were like, yeah, I mean, I was kind of excited. Like I didn't have to eat them or something. Or like I got another free fry or something.
Oh,
like,
okay. Yeah.
Like, or something like that. So anyway, it was really interesting because like even that situation that didn't seem like it would ever be in my realm of possibility. Like I would be angry, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, actually, maybe I'd be upset. I don't know. It's between the two. But some other people had completely different feelings. I was like, that really helps me understand that like other people might hear something and react a completely different way.
It's so interesting just how that adds so much perspective,
Yeah.
that other people faced with the same situation see it in a completely different light.
Yeah.
And
So,
I think that's huge.
I think we should do that. That exercise is a really good one and could be done more often. I'm surprised that was the first time I did something like that.
Yeah, no, that's a good workshop.
And
Yeah.
kind of where I was going to, like, and I don't want to get off too off topic, but like the skeptic in me, I was always a little hesitant about this stuff because we see a lot of these leaders who do not have emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest. Like, Trump
yeah.
doesn't have emotional intelligence. Steve Jobs didn't really have emotional intelligence, I don't think, because
Yeah, he actually
was,
got
like,
called out in one of these chapters.
Oh, really?
As being,
Where did
it might
they
have
say
been
that?
actually one of the other.
So, right, I'm in the about 130 pages into a biography about Steve Jobs, and yes, he was a dick, but at the same time, he was a very emotional person, but he didn't know how to be emotional toward other people. He lacked empathy, I think.
Right. Which these books tell you, like, oh, you need to do this, but like, everyone is different. So it's like you don't need to be empathetic. Like honestly, you don't have to be. Like maybe good leaders are, right? I'm not saying, but like you don't need to. I don't know. You know
well,
what I mean?
I think great leaders are, and I think but the outliers, like the people who really kind of like overperform and shake things up, are the people who are just like so emotional and wear it on their sleeve, like a Steve Jobs, like one of those people who's just like such a visionary and so probably overly weighted on the IQ side of things, which is I think is what we're traditionally used to seeing in leadership, and what we traditionally promote is just like really intelligent people, even if they don't necessarily have that emotional piece to work with other people. But you see like kind of examples like Elon Musk and like Steve Jobs, who are like very eccentric and like big personalities, and they've driven some very successful companies, but we assume that that's just what a leader looks like for everything else. Right. And I think it's just not true. Like that's a very volatile personality, right? So you can see some very like extreme success by the way people respond to that, but it's not necessarily what works for, the other 99% of organizational structures.
So that leads me to question, like, do you think different types of businesses
Wow.
like need a different emotional intelligence for them? Like based on the industry? So maybe Steve Jobs lacked, empathy for other people, but the way his emotional intelligence, maybe his self-awareness was what Apple needed to take off. Maybe empathy, I'm not,
Right.
everyone should have it, but maybe a lack in that, and maybe an overarching feeling of self-awareness and what he needed to do to take the product to the next level is what made it great, maybe. I don't know. I'm just thinking like different, just based off of different industries, maybe you need, maybe one of those pillars outweighs the others.
I could see something, and I've heard the short term before that like fear is the best motivator, and maybe I could see it for companies who need to like develop an idea or have a product go to market very quickly, like where there's like new development and intense competition. And there's like a lot of value to be the first mover there, or to have like the very best product, and you have to like have someone who's driving that vision. I could see something like that being a situation where you might not need someone who's going to like, maybe you don't have to like your boss, but again, I feel like they have to be overweighted on that intelligence side to where you're like, this guy's a dick, but good God, does he know like what the hell he's doing? It's like, I'm going to follow him because like,
Right.
geez, he's smart.
Right. Do you know,
or she.
Do you guys know who Alex Hormozy is?
Mm-mm.
No? So I don't know a ton about him, but he runs a few businesses. Like he started a gym company when he was young in his 20s. And anyway, he was on Chris Williamson's podcast. And they were talking about, Alex was talking about exactly what you were just talking about. He some of the most successful people he's ever met in business, he said they all have a mouse and a cat. He said they're chasing after something, a mouse. They're going after something which, keeps them going, but they're also in fear of what's chasing them, like failure. So they're always running towards something and from something, which I think is interesting because like for some people like are more motivated by failure. Some are more motivated by success, but from his perspective, like chasing something, but also being afraid of something else kind of keeps you from being stagnant in a way. Because if you lose the one motion, let's say you're working towards something, and if you lose the one motivation that you have, you're working towards something, but you're not running from something, you can become stagnant. So it's kind of nice to, have that fear, but also work towards something.
Yeah. See, it's interesting because motivation is one of the pillars that they discuss in this like kind of 5-pillar concept for emotional intelligence. But the angle they take on motivation is that people with high emotional intelligence are driven more for the sake of achievement, just for the sake of achievement. They're just driven by not necessarily like big checks or like fame or kind of like recognition. It's just kind of like that intrinsic curiosity to solve. And one of the reasons that's so beneficial too is because they kind of see optimism in the face of failure is kind of like the buzz line that they're using there. So it's like you're not just motivated by everything is in the win. If you don't close the deal, like then it's all over. It's like the motivated person who's high in that quality from an emotional intelligence perspective. It's like the deal doesn't close, like everything they've been working for. It's just like, wow, now they're motivated because they're like, we couldn't get it done. Why? Like, I got to figure it out. Like, what's the net? Like, I'm so curious. Like, how can I be better? And I think, and that again plays into that self-awareness piece where it's like, if they're self-aware and they know their weaknesses, they know their strengths, they think they're really good at what they do and they're confident in that. They're confident that, they take good inventory of their skills. Failure is almost like a good thing because you're like, wow, I think I'm really good at this, and I still wasn't good enough. I could get that much better. Right. That's I've played a lot of rugby, right, and I've been the captain on teams, and I've been on teams who I thought, I've collectively I've been around this is a good team for this level. Like we are very good, and we'll take a loss. And I'm like, man, guys, we needed that. That was the best thing that could have happened to us at this stage because look around the room. Like I believe in every one of you guys. I believe that we together can do something really special, and we just didn't get it done out there. That means we have so much more room to grow. That means we can get that much better.
Just makes you tighten it up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. It shows you that there's still room to grow, even when you're confident that you're already good. So
this is like a great. How far are you into it?
This is just literally the first article. So who knows? It could be a whole pod series we could get going here.
But like you and I mentioned, maybe we each kind of maybe read this book, or because I another work conference that I was at about a year and a half ago, they handed out the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book. I haven't read it yet, but I have it. So like, if we've already hit on some good topics on it, but if we all read this book and then came back and did another serious piece on the top, I think that'd be maybe even more in depth. And we'd probably each learn about a pillar that maybe we weren't good at before or not aware of before, and kind of hit it again.
Yeah. If you want to hear more, leave a comment.
Yeah.
Write us an email. Send us an email.
Yeah. We'll read it next podcast.
There we go. I love it.
All right. So for the next topic, the Pac-12 collapse. I know that. So I've been wondering this. As a football fan, and I love college football, but there's been so much that's happened over the last few years of teams switching conferences and conferences going from 10 to 12, 12 to 10, and then all of these accusations of everything. And it's a lot's been going down the last few years. So I was wondering, since the Pac-12 is pretty much gone, they only have the 4 original remaining teams.
Who are?
Washington State.
No, yeah. You're on it. Washington State, Stanford, Oregon State, and Cal.
Wow.
So they got the OG 4. They've been a conference for over 100 years. But I was wondering, I was like, there's got to be a timeline with everything happening between the conferences that kind of led to this result. And CBS Sports had a fantastic entire timeline. And I was reading it earlier, and I kind of made some notes, and it painted a pretty good story. So to kind of kick off the timeline, it kind of all started in 2009. No, I'm not going to live in 2009, 2010 early, and you're not going to be thinking, he's going to go year by year. No. But what actually happened was in the very start of it, so the Big Ten, in 2009, finally conferences were looking to expand. And they announced hey, the next 12 to 18 months, we're, going to provide recommendations, possible new members, because they were enjoying success on the early returns of the Big Ten network. It was the first of its kind in college sports. So this was every conference has a big network now. So this is the first domino.
So 2009, the Big Ten is truly just 10 teams. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, and also, so they literally are the first ones that had a television network. What about the Texas Longhorn? I thought Texas had a.
Wait for the story, my friend.
Okay, patience, Alex. Let's see it.
Here we go.
All right.
So, because I remember, like Big Noon Saturdays started, and when they got the Big Ten network, this started an entire series of, because this is when TV was taking off, more people were paying attention to the internet, so more big companies wanted to cover college sports because they realized people didn't just pay attention to professionals; they pay attention to college too. So, over the next few years, Pac-10 gets a little bigger, goes to the Pac-12. They got Colorado, left the Big 12. Nebraska, 2 days later, piggybacks off of that. It's like, hey, we're going to the Big Ten. So, a few months after the TV deal, things are starting to move around a little bit.
And that's pretty significant too, because Nebraska for the Big Ten is out there. That's now we're talking that's a very far distance for people from Rutgers, who's in the Big Ten, and Penn State, Ohio State. That's really far. So that to me is a pretty big deal, because that's probably is that the furthest expansion, maybe traveling wise, the furthest school within the same conference traveling wise, or.
And I don't want to get too far out of it since, Ron, you're going through the timeline.
No,
but
it's little branches. It's fine.
But it is interesting too, the geographical spread, because I think originally, right, you want teams close together so you get rivalries and travel and all that. And then as you grow and revenue starts pouring in from college sports, the commercial side of it, you want to expand your conference to include teams that are from regions that you normally would not otherwise watch your conference.
Exactly. Which, the expansion and the whole around this time, this was the first time in a while, the Big Ten was looking uncertain. And the Pac-10 at the time, the commissioner was looking to keep the momentum going. He travels to Texas. and he sees if they would join the Pac-10 to create a 16-team super conference, including Texas and Oklahoma. Because they're like, if we can get Texas and Oklahoma, we can kind of keep it going. We're going to create a massive 16 super conference, split it into probably a West and a South, something like that, kind of like the Big 12 was doing. And what ended up happening was the Big 12 got nervous that Texas was going to leave. The Big 12 finally gave in to Texas having their own network.
Oh, there it is.
The Pac-12 talked to the Big Ten, talked to Texas about it too. They kind of dangled your own network in front of them, but the Pac-12 wanted too much of the revenue from Texas that was going to get. And then Big 12 was like, okay, we just lost Nebraska, we just lost Colorado, we're about to lose Texas, our biggest school, Texas football. And they're like, okay.
They have more leverage with Big 12 than they do with PAC.
Exactly. Let's give Texas what they want.
Right.
They give Texas the deal.
Good play.
Right, exactly. They give into letting them have their own TV deal. A few years go by, and the only two teams that made it to the national championship, in the CFP, Oregon lost to Auburn, and they lost to Ohio State. And after a few years, there were a few more realignments, one team here, one team there, nothing crazy, but they really couldn't expand. They acquired Utah out of the Mountain West. But, that's not a huge grab. Yes, Utah got good, but it's not a huge grab because they didn't grab anyone from, another Power 5. So, and then for a few, they don't have anyone that goes to the college football playoff. Washington goes at number 4, gets smoked by Alabama, and then more TV deals start to fall. In 2016, the ACC, who at the time was definitely not, football-wise, was not at the Pac-12 level. Pac-12 had USC, who was their biggest school by far. USC gets in trouble. Pac-12 slammed the brakes on USC, which they didn't. They couldn't go to bowl games for a few years. So they much they took their biggest, they put their biggest school who just shined on TV and just smacked them around for a little bit, and that kind of hurt them. At that time, 2 years later, the ACC agrees to a 20-year extension with ESPN. So the ACC set with the biggest sports, network in the country. The next year, Big Ten, 6-year deal with Fox and ESPN and basketball, tripled their media rights for the Big Ten. So Big Ten's expanding. Big Ten's expanding. ACC's expanding. It's growing.
Do you know what is media rights? Is that money or is that coverage?
Yeah. So I think this one was a $10 billion deal, and every school in the conference is guaranteed a base of that. And we'll get to it later, but there's a whole thing with Apple coming. Wait for this. But so that happens with the Big Ten. In 2018, Pac-12, so bowl games are big for schools. Everyone knows that. They go 1-8 in bowl games, and other conferences start to pull away financially. So some murmurs start.
Wait, so this may be really dumb, but do college football teams earn money in bowl games?
I believe so.
I would think so.
Yeah. Well,
I think you get a media share.
There's so much exposure, and everyone sees on ESPN and stuff, it's they will rank conferences and how they did in bowl games. Being this, ACC's really shining this year. They got...
Yeah, but it's not just the Big Ten wants to brag they're better than the SEC or something, or is that... There's probably some money aspect to it, but I'm curious.
I don't know exactly with bowl games, but just media-wise, it's huge. Because also the big media companies are looking for teams who are doing well to pair with. And at this time, their TV contract was running out. So that happens.
One clarifying question there. Yeah. So you said Pac-12, the year is 2018, Pac-12 goes 1-8 in bowl games, right? And other conferences start to pull away financially. Correct. What does that mean? What's the interrelation between conferences financially? I would think it would be with them and whoever their media deals.
So what happened was it mostly had to do with commissioners' salaries. And the next point, commissioners and head coaches. It started to get so the Pac-12 commissioner was making $4.8 million that year.
Wow. Okay.
And the SEC, the biggest, the biggest football conference, was making 1.9. And you're okay, they're big conferences, they're making a shit ton of money. But when you look at the coaches, the SEC coaches, yes, some of them were making more money than the SEC commissioner. But the Pac-12 commissioner was racking in money when none of the head coaches were making anything remotely to the Pac-12. So not only was the Pac-12 not performing, but it was like all the money's going to the top.
Disbalanced. Yeah.
Right. It was not balanced. The coaches, schools weren't doing well. And then, can you scroll down, Celine, please? The winner of 29, USC, the athletic director announces everything's on the table for future conferences. But before that, there's a private equity twist in this too.
Oh, those bad guys.
Winner of 2019, I did this verbatim. With the league floundering, Scott, who's the commissioner, pursued a private equity lifeline. The plan called for the Pac-12 to bundle its assets into an entity called the Pac-12 New Co., with the goal of soliciting $500 million in exchange for a 10% stake in the league. Later in
Take it to
2019,
Shark Tank.
he told Mercury News that the league's presidents and chancellors ruled out the proposal. So that sounds like a Hail Mary. Like they're trying to make more money. Like just to keep schools interested. I don't know. Like no other conference is trying to do that. So like it sounds like a Hail Mary from the commish. Like, okay, people are starting to talk about leaving. We're not doing great. I'm making a shit ton of money. People are starting to talk about it. Like, what do you think about that?
Wait, so you're saying like that you think 2019, winter of 2019, when this news article came out, that's when things started to seem like they were heading this direction.
Well, whenever there's murmurs about a conference not doing well, people leaving, they're not able to acquire schools whenever they're jumping conferences, and it's like, why is no one going to the Pac-12? Why are people starting to leave? And then USC, their biggest school, like media-wise, who's very well known, is talking about leaving, and then all of a sudden it's like they're trying to wrap up a deal with a private equity firm. It's almost like it seems like, to me, like this is not what this is, but it seems like a Hail Mary to trying to acquire league presidents and people who like they're trying to keep people in the conference. It sounds
so
like just a
weird.
money-making scheme to keep them in there.
Dude, it's just this has all been so far. I know you got more to your story.
Oh, yeah,
here,
yeah.
But what it seems like right now is that the leaders at the Pac-12 just were not good at negotiation and/or were too like they were challenging people, trying to get too much. Like they were asking for too much money essentially in the deals. Like the negotiation deals stunk. Like even like that's what it sounds like. And it looks like here. I mean, once you have PE guys, you have you put a shell company or a holding company or whatever, and $500 million. Like that's just giving them more leverage in deals, and that also lets them take out credit potentially. So yeah, that's just a financial play. I think there's really nothing to it. Like
what do you think they're gonna put that $500 million towards?
Well, so a lot of it's gonna be.
Is it used to like push down as like to the schools? Is it used to give like USC a financial incentive to stay? I
don't know. I mean, I think that it could be from some of it is going to be for like probably schools, but I would say where was I going with this? I don't really know actually.
Because you'd think it's kind of structured as a partnership, like all of the schools have a shared interest in.
Yeah, I have to look into this because now I'm curious because I was thinking originally to give you more, you can get more credit, more leverage, and that means you'd be able to get more favorable, deal terms. Mm-hmm. But now, 2019 rates were low too. Anyway, I don't know. I'm not sure, but anyway, maybe you keep going. Sorry.
No, yeah, I just thought it was a positive spin. Like I was expecting, stuff to happen within the conference, maybe some kind of beef between commissioners and stuff, and then there was a private equity like spin in there, and I was like, what the hell? Like it was not in line with what I thought how it was going to go. So I thought it'd be interesting, on your thought in there. But then, so that was around 2019, in the 2020, right around when COVID happened, SEC lands a new deal. So in the last 2 years, Big Ten lands a deal, ACC lands a deal, SEC's landed a deal, and then COVID happens.
I'm assuming that's what ESPN, SEC network, right? They're hand in hand, I think.
Yeah. They're going from CBS to ESPN. Yep. So when COVID happened, the Pac-12 followed the Big Ten, and they were like, no, we're not going to play any games until the spring of 2021. 6 weeks later, they pivot and they say, okay, we're going to play a 7-game season without fans. And yeah, everyone kind of handled COVID differently, but some people were saying, that, oh, they don't take football seriously, whatever. That doesn't really play too much into it, but, people in the conference wanted them to see play more games. Anyway, 2021, Pac-12 commissioner, they go, he leaves. Well, they had a mutual agreement, obviously, as they say, but the new commissioner from MGM Grand Resorts International is supposed to be, have a lot of connections, and they wanted him to make a great TV deal. That was kind of why they hired him. But that was around when NIL deals started to happen, and players started to go places because they were getting money places. So he was trying to tread water with the NIL deals, trying to make a new TV deal, and this was his first time being a commissioner of a conference. So they were balancing a lot. A few months later, Texas and Oklahoma joined the SEC. The Big 12 looks uncertain again. People are like, oh, what's going on? That made big news, especially for the Texas. Texas, Big 12 kept them in before they almost went to the Pac-12. Pac-12 doesn't capitalize on teams moving around once again. Big 12 makes a move. BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, UFC, and then Domino's UCF. I'm sorry. Thank you. And then a lot starts to happen. UCLA, USC pull out. They're going to the Big 10. Pac-12 searching for TV deals. They can't find it. Big 10 announces another huge TV deal. 7 years, $8 billion in media rights with CBS, Fox, NBC. So at this time, the Big 12 has more time on their contract than the Pac-12 does. So the Big 12's not really looking for a deal yet. They got 3 years left. And the Big 12 finds a TV deal before the Pac-12 does. 6 years, $2.3 billion with ESPN and Fox. Pac-12 can't get a TV deal.
Oh my gosh!
People are freaking out.
Streaming on YouTube TV, YouTube Live.
Yeah,
not even YouTube TV.
They can't. So Colorado leaves Pac-12. At this point, the new commissioner tries to make Apple. I think Apple approached them about a subscription-based payout incentive with a reported base salary of $20 million per school. At this point, the new TV deals were given like the Big Ten, the SEC, around $32 million per school. So it's $12 million per school is a lot, and they wanted more. So that deal never went through. August of 2023, not long after that deal doesn't go through, Oregon, Washington, this is just, days ago, pull out, going to the Big Ten. A few days later, Arizona, ASU, Utah, go to the Big 12. They have 4 teams left. So the big things that really it sounds like, that stopped them, they didn't bend the knee to Texas when they could have got them years ago. That would have got so many more teams from the Big 12. They can't lend media deals, period. They just couldn't. And they never capitalize on schools leaving other conferences. That's kind of what I thought was the 3 big things.
Wow. I think there's just so much to it, and it's crazy because – so one of the things I was thinking about too, so I saw another report that there was a deal that the Pac-12 turned down that as long as the Pac-12 network got 2.5 million in subscribers, which I feel like that's pretty doable, each school would get 30 million, which is basically 32 million, like you just said, like the average school gets in a media deal. So to me, like there must be some. It sounds like they're being greedy over there. I'm not sure, because that seems like a pretty good deal. Yeah. But I also understand that teams like USC and UCLA, I think, carry the weight over there, and they probably are like, there's not probably a ton of money in ASU, and comparatively, like Washington, probably not as much, right? Like Oregon, there's probably a lot of money, but USC and UCLA are like dominant factors. It's like Texas, them, Ohio State, Bama, so. I think he probably had a tough time because the parties were so. Their demands were so varied because their schools were such different positions. Washington State versus USC, I don't know, it just doesn't.
It's kind of like disparity in the quality of product that they're able to put out. Perfectly. And I think it's very tough if it's operated kind of like in a partnership type model where you all kind of have equal share in the conference as a whole, and some are overperforming, some are underperforming. Obviously, your overperformers are going to want their proportional share of the revenues that are coming in. but it's so difficult with sport, right? Because that just doesn't like that. Then the rich keep getting richer, and you continuously like devalue your product by not having a competitive conference.
Right.
So it's so tough to balance that, I think.
Exactly. And I think I don't remember exactly clearly, but there was a deal that the Pac-12 was trying to make. It might have been with Texas, with the money that it made distributing that throughout the Pac-12 teams. And I think, like you said, Alex, USC and UCLA were the big hitters, right? Like so when they left, I mean, the other 4 schools that left, Arizona, ASU, Utah, when they see those 2 leave, they know that it's just a ticking time bomb. So they got out too.
So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, but you know what though? I feel like at that time that was a chance because you're getting rid of, even though your 2 stallions, your 2 prime producers are leaving. I feel like the playing field at Pac-12 would be closer, and then you could bring in another growing market, like I don't know, maybe like a Boise State or something, or like which you know they can be competitive. Like they would bring in.
But do you want to if you're like Boise State in the Mountain West, who dominates is always at the top of the Mountain West? Do you want to leave a conference you're good at to go to a conference that might be dying?
For the money?
They might be they might be dying though.
That's exactly where
they might promise them that money, then they get to the conference and it's like, oh, remember how we had 4 teams and you're the 5th? We can't get anyone else. And then the money falls through.
Well, I know now. I'm talking like just when USC and UCLA left. Oh. Now you've got kind of that we were talking about disparity in product. Yeah. That stinks that you lost them, but now it's like, okay, we can bring in a couple new teams really quickly, get a deal, and just like suck it up. I don't know why this took so long for them to like sit and not figure something out. Is my point. Like USC and UCLA, that was 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, no, like, you're right.
So to me, it's like, why could they not convince any other? Like UNLV is Las Vegas. Las Vegas is booming, right?
Yeah,
like, grab one of those schools.
That's true.
Like I just.
No, you're right. Like this just goes to show once again they can't capitalize on schools leaving other conferences. They couldn't do it.
South Dakota State, dude. Like there's so many schools out there too that.
South Dakota State, is that stretching a little bit for PAC?
But again, it doesn't matter.
That's kind of tough too when you branded yourself as a regional kind of conference, and then all the other conferences, the other conferences are becoming more, I guess not global, but national, I guess would be the term, and they're spreading and trying to capture more markets, and you're literally the Pacific conference. Like you can't just go grab a team from Florida. Like you can't go snatch up like USF or something if you want to. I mean, I guess you could theoretically, but
ACC too, right? ACC is mostly
and the other thing you got to think about too is you have football, right, which is your revenue sport, and you have basketball, which is also a revenue sport. But every other sport that you have in that conference, for the most part, is going to be a non-revenue sport. So you want to be able to snatch up enough teams from a geography to where you can make 2 divisions or whatever, so that all your non-revenue sports don't have to fly, like we talked about from California, USC going all the way out to Rutgers or whoever.
That's a great point. No, and that is really something to think about. And earlier we talked about bowl games and how after the 1-8 season and teams were moving around, how there were murmurs of people would leave the Pac-12. Celine put up a great stat here. Depending on the bowl game, colleges receive anywhere from $225K to $8.2 million. So yeah, the conference earns money that way.
Huh.
That feels right though, because there's some. I mean, we just have a ton of bowl games. It's like there's so many teams that play football in the postseason that just don't have any reason to be playing football. Like they're just not good games. They're not well attended by any means. It's like it's just a money play.
Money and then
it's just they know that people want to watch their team and are desperate for it.
It's just so wild that obviously I knew this, but I didn't until we kind of started looking at this more. Like, it really does feel like these public universities are acting like investors and companies, saying like, we're going to invest a ton of money in a new program, a new coach, and then there is a direct benefit to their performance. Like, you go to a bowl game and make $8.2 million. That's good for the program. That's good for the school. You're paying all those other sports. Your budget, your P&L looks better. It really does act like a corporation, which is pretty interesting. Which I kind of knew, but I didn't realize to this extent, right? Like a losing season isn't just bad for the fan base. Like it's not just we're all upset.
And you know what? With NIL deals, there's a lot of money going to players now from sponsors who, maybe beforehand wanted to do some kind of deal with the college. Now they're going to the kids.
Yeah.
So now they're losing out on money. So maybe they're trying to receive money elsewhere.
That's a really good thought.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm also so interested too in where you mentioned the 2019 or whatever with the PAC, they were looking to bring in private equity at 10% for $500 million. What is the plan for that money? Does it just funnel down to the programs? Because if you think about it, the money that you're going to be able to generate as a conference, right, comes from, I'm assuming, largely that media deal, because that's what we keep talking about. And the way your media deal gets better is if you have a more competitive product, right? So if you're saying maybe the thought is we, as the Pac-12, are not competitive enough on a national scale to be able to really represent and draw in more viewers and get a better contract. So we need money to make our programs better, to get better coaches, to upgrade our facilities and stuff. And we can't generate that right now because we just don't have a good TV deal.
Maybe that was
We need some capital right now. We need some growth capital. We need to take this $500 million, push it down to our programs, let them invest in their infrastructure, let them invest in their coaches, and ultimately get us a better product that we can actually make marketable.
Dude, I actually think you're right. And that's maybe why Oregon and a couple of those schools out there have really crazy jerseys, right? They really put their name out there to try to draw in viewership. Because remember when those jerseys came out, they were sick, right?
Yeah.
Everyone was talking about them all the time. So maybe, and I know their infrastructure isn't perfect out there. Obviously there's really cool stadiums and stuff out there, but that's a really good point.
Damn, Dom, that's such a good. They gave up trying to make money by just putting a better team and better teams on the field. They couldn't reinvest the money they were making from football. They're like, fuck that, we give up. We got to make it from somewhere else.
You know what's actually interesting too? Everything out there is way more expensive, obviously. So maybe that has something to do with it. For them, renovate Penn State rebuilding their football facility, which they've done or something, definitely costs less than it does in freaking L.A.
Think about so remember they slapped USC on the hand, right?
Right.
They play in the Coliseum. Coliseum is beautiful. They love putting the Coliseum and USC, a top 5 team, on TV. And for years they couldn't do it. No wonder they couldn't get any deals with any media groups. Because the media groups would want their best team in the best stadium that would attract the most people, and they couldn't do it for 3-4 years.
Because
of all the sanctions
that
they put on USC,
and then
COVID. So there's 5-6 years where they can't market their best team in the best stadium to attract the most people. They lost all that revenue.
You know what's funny? I was talking about this yesterday with someone. The Penn State USC Rose Bowl game, which was one of the best ever. I remember it was I don't remember watching USC games since then. I don't even remember Caleb, whatever his name is, our Heisman winner last year. I watched a ton of college football.
Are you talking USC versus Texas?
No, that was farther back. That was the best game of all time. But that's the thing. I don't know if I've seen a USC game.
Never.
In years. But before that, it was all the time. I always watched them. Even
they had a real
Heisman winner, and I don't
golden
even know.
era. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's a me problem, but maybe that's just also you saying that they can't get it out there.
Well, there's probably a ton of factors that go into it. I'm just thinking of it had to be one. If you can't show your best team out there,
Lost Pete Carroll, right?
Pete Carroll.
Yeah,
well, there's that whole thing. Pete got out before they got slapped, so he was not sticking around. He was not sticking around for all the Reggie Bush stuff.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
But that was under him though, right?
Oh yeah, it happened under him. Yeah, he's chomping that gum in Seattle now.
Yeah.
Well, the other perspective to this all too is we just talked about the conference and what are you going to do if you can bring $500 million into your conference and then push it down to the schools, but then obviously the schools are going to invest in their sports programs independently of the conference and any money that might come from that as well. So they've constantly got to be thinking how much do we want to invest in our program and how is the conference and the revenue we could get from the conference going to help us out with that goal too. So it's that's why the big dogs of a failing conference have to say we want to invest more in our football program, and moving to another conference, the revenues we'll get from them is what's going to allow us to do that.
Speaking of revenues in general, there's actually, I hope I get this stat right. So I think the schools get revenue in different ways, and I think media has been a bigger driver of revenue in the Big Ten, and then I think like around like 30%, and then I think this like 30% of the revenue of West Coast teams was from like the donors and like their like sponsorships, which to me is interesting. Like I don't know if that's, maybe they are getting smoked on their Pac-12 their deals, right?
Wow.
And then they need to rely on.
That's
their,
interesting.
What do you call it? Shoot, their their support groups that like.
Right. What do you? God.
Like
Why am I
people
blanking?
that are like, oh, I can't think of the word.
I know.
You know what I mean, though.
Sling. Can you?
What's the word? Donors.
No.
Yeah, donors. What's the donor group? The donor group.
No, it's
Not alone,
school. What is it? Everyone think.
Oh man. Nah, whatever.
Look up major.
Cut this.
Yeah, look up. This is good. People need to know we have flaws. Who are the major contributors to college football?
Or even like
to
high
college
school,
football,
or even high school football, or like whatever.
It's on the tip.
No.
No.
What's
It's
the
like,
group
is it
called?
board?
Boosters.
Boosters. There we
Thank
go. Yeah, we are dumb. No, we're good. Why can't we think of that? But yeah, boosters. Boosters have a lot to do because I mean we always hear of like look at Coach O's contract with LSU a few years ago. Boosters wanted him out, and they had to pay him $17 million to not coach the next year. And boosters were willing to pay that to get him out.
So,
boosters control so much.
What I wonder about what Alex just said though is he said that the boosters are a much bigger percentage of their total revenue.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's like a little bit of a denominator effect kind of thing where it's just they make so much less that the in total aggregate number that the booster percentage is much higher.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
Whereas the big schools like the SEC, like I can't imagine that Pac-12 schools receive more from boosters than like big time football schools.
No, you're right. You're right. So maybe it is more of their
percentage basis, but just because
right.
that total number is so much lower, which would be kind of scary for them. To be honest.
Yeah, and if that's 30% of their money coming in, and the other 60%, let's say whatever of that percentage is a media, if that goes away, then I mean that's how you shoot yourself in the foot.
So. What's the deal then? Is the PAC
right now they have
12 just gone?
The remaining teams.
Are they just not going to happen anymore? So
I don't
for
know
2020 for this upcoming season they still have
everyone.
Everyone.
Yep.
And then next year if they don't make any moves fast, they're down to 4 teams.
Right.
I mean, you would think the year after that they're gone.
Is it 4? I would think so. Yeah.
But what is it? What does it gone mean? Like you just.
I mean, you just don't have any teams left.
They just leave and you help them get into the Mountain West or something, or like.
I mean, this is the casual part, right? Think about this. If you're one of the 4 teams left, you're like, guys, we got a shot to win the conference. I don't know.
Washington State Pac-12 champions. Let's go. That was actually sick. Yeah, dude. What's our predictions? What do you think? What's gonna happen the next year?
Okay, I think they'll go poof. So when I was talking to my dad about it, my dad pays a lot of attention to college football. He thinks eventually, over the next few years, everything will be the Big Ten and the SEC, but there will be conferences within the Big Ten and the SEC. You think there will be a Northeast, Southwest of each?
So Big 12 gone too?
I think eventually, maybe. Yeah, they're holding on right now, but I think eventually.
Yeah, they just acquired all these teams though.
Yeah, but over the next few years, I think they'll hang around for a little bit. I mean, obviously Pac-12's still there, but you look at the ACC, and wait, Celine might know something about this. What's going on with the ACC teams? Didn't you say something? Yeah. Okay, maybe not.
Well, the ACC just moved their headquarters, by the way, which to a bigger market. I think they moved to. Wait, did they move to Charlotte, or was it Orlando? No, it was Charlotte. Yeah, it was Charlotte. Yeah. So they came to Charlotte. So that's that's a positive sign for ACC. They were in Greensboro before.
It might take a while for it to get there, but it's a possibility. It might not. I would like for there to be more than 2. 2 would be boring, you know.
I think you're totally right, though. I think it becomes honestly. I think those 4 teams join the Big Ten, and I think that it's all it really is under different leadership, it's under different media deals, and it's now you got your West Coast Conference and you got your East Coast Conference, and you play like a couple cross, maybe like one West Coast game if you're an East Coast team and vice versa. It's going to turn into that again. It's going to be the same.
I think it's if it does come down to like 2 conferences that each just have a ton of teams, I think it might stay like that for a little bit, but I don't think it'll stay like that forever. And it's just the same thing is that we were talking about in the Pac-12 is like the big dogs want to eat their fair share. And so all of a sudden you're going to have 2 conferences and there's going to be 50 teams, but only 5 of them are good, and those guys are going to be tapping themselves on the shoulder and be like, we're sharing all this money we're generating with all these other teams. Let's get out and let's make our power conference, Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed today's podcast. As a reminder, you can find us on Instagram at the Half and Half Club Podcast. We recently launched YouTube. Believe it or not, we're actually all pretty good looking guys, so if you want to take a peek there, we are Half and Half Club Podcast on YouTube. As always, you can find us anywhere that good podcasts are streamed. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Music. And if you have any inquiries, feedback, or just want to get in touch with us, our Gmail is coffeebeers00@gmail.com. Also, starting next week, anyone who leaves us a 5-star review on either Spotify, Google, Apple, or Amazon Podcasts, we will read your comment live on the pod.
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is.